Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Bina and I am the founder of the yoga movement and also a licensed physician assistant who believes in science and alternative healing. And I'll go into why that part of my story and my own transformation has been so eye-opening as to why there's more to this idea of holistic health than we have traditionally understood. Also touching upon some sometimes underrated topics such as faith and spirituality. So I have a podcast episode on this, on The Voice That Sees. It's my journey with having had thyroid cancer at 21 and then going into the world of medicine and understanding that yes, treatments can work, medications can help with symptoms, and there are also curative therapies. There's things like gene therapy that's looking to actually cure the disease. And while these things can definitely impact a person's health and well-being and help them physically, there's also the mental aspect, the spiritual aspect, emotional, energetic, and what many different traditions, such as ancient traditions, shamanism, even religion, if you look at Christianity, they often believe that the root cause of anyone's physical ailment is often related to something imbalanced in the spirit. And so when I went into the world of medicine, I noticed that even on a personal level, I still take thyroid hormone supplementation. It's part of the journey after you've had your thyroid removed, if you have had it removed. And I noticed that for a couple of years, even though I was taking this medication every day and they were monitoring levels and the levels looked good on paper, I still kind of felt off. I felt that my body was different and I didn't really feel that I could even explain what was happening to me, as in my body had undergone this big transformative change. I didn't really feel the same and I didn't know how to convey that to a lot of my providers. And as I later learned, there is this element of something called dissociation that some patients can experience, or some people in therapy, that's what they refer to as when someone feels as though the trauma has been so debilitating or so life-altering that they actually dissociate from their body, and so they don't really look like they're present when they're speaking to you. And another thing is that there could be something called brain fog, which I didn't really know what that experience would feel like or how to describe it to a provider, where you speak to people but you're not completely present, you're not able to retain the information that they're speaking to you, even though it's just really small conversations. And people will notice, because I had a lot of friends who didn't understand what I was experiencing. I didn't even know what I was experiencing at that time, that when I was speaking to them and listening, they just knew I wasn't completely there, and then they would get angry about it. And they're like, "You're not even listening." And I'm like, "I am, and yet I'm not, but I don't know how to convey this to you." And then in shamanism, there's something called fragmentation, where shamans believe that when a person's going through a traumatizing experience, the soul, because it feels unsafe, perhaps shocked at that moment, it becomes fragmented and a part of the soul is left behind in that event. And so they do things like soul retrieval to retrieve that aspect of the soul back into the multidimensional being so that a person can reclaim their wholeness and feel more whole in who they are. Mind, body, spirit, soul, the whole thing. Everything is integrated. So throughout my 20s, just noticing that these symptoms were still happening, and then I go to my first yoga class and I notice that as I come out of yoga, I'm feeling energized, alive, and also very in my body, very present in my body. And it was something that I don't think I really even knew even before I had the surgery. And as I'm noticing that I feel really present in my body, my tuners are kind of just going up, as in, okay, there's something more than just the world of Western medicine. As most people know, when you dabble into the world of holistic healing and you go into one, you kind of find other things. They kind of just come to you. And then I started being introduced to the world of Reiki and energy work, and then also learning the power of integrative medicine by practicing medicine in these hospitals and oncology particularly, and then working closely with the integrative medicine departments to learn more about things like yoga nidra, music therapy, art therapy. How can all these different tools be implemented into whole body, whole person cancer care? All these things are opening my mind and expanding the horizons of what I knew to be helpful for a patient along his or her journey. And as my personal journey was also happening at the same time, what I was noticing is that in these hospitals, taking care of some of these really ill patients, some of them staying in the hospitals for 6-7 months at a time due to complications, due to other things that suddenly appeared during their cancer journey, maybe some other comorbidities. Also noticing that a lot of these patients were experiencing divorces. They were going through financial troubles. Some of them didn't even want to talk to their family, even the weeks before they passed away. It became even more of a grip, as in they were just shut off, and they said no. They didn't believe that their family was there for them, and they started to really shut these people out. And then, as a physician assistant, we and the social worker, we had to come together. We had to get palliative care involved to understand, okay, we have to respect the patient's wishes. And also, it was hard because I'm having these conversations privately with these patients' loved ones who are crying and sharing that they want to be closer to their family member, that they want to be at peace. So just noticing all these different things that were happening, but I didn't really capture the full grasp of it while I was working at these institutions. Not until the lockdown happened, and I was in my last role working in the hospital directly, which was dealing with GU oncology, so the genitourinary oncology. And most of my patients, because of the provider I was working with, I noticed that most of my patients happened to have prostate cancer. These were men. And let me share that that was one of the toughest environments I've ever worked in. And it was a big reason why I left the clinical world directly, working in these hospitals for 4 years. What happened that year was 2019 going to 2020, the lockdown happened. Many of these men didn't know how to express their emotions. I was yelled at a lot, and imagine seeing 20 to 30 people a day. I was yelled at a lot, and granted, they had the right to feel what they were feeling because some of these patients, they were scheduled back to back. And if you work in healthcare, or even if you're a patient, you know that the schedule doesn't go according to what's planned. And working in this busy institution and just seeing 20 to 30 people a day, it was so much. And it wasn't just the fact that you're making clinical decisions and you have to be on your A game because things can change. The decision making doesn't go as planned, like, okay, A, B, C. It could be somehow patients in the treatment area getting chemotherapy, and all of a sudden maybe their vitals are off, and then the nurse calls you and pages you and says, what do we do for this patient? So you're dealing with the patient that you're seeing, you're also dealing with other things happening. So I definitely learned a lot of leadership, and I also learned that emotions are a big part of holistic health. I also noticed in this role that for some men who didn't know how to express their emotions, their wives or their partners would speak up for them. And I don't think that's necessarily what they wanted. I think it's something that a lot of them just got used to. It's just my personal assessment, what I saw. So all of this happens, and the lockdown happens, and then we're starting to see some patients virtually and some patients in person. We're not going into the clinic every day. There was a system that was set up so that some of the providers could stay at home and do visits from their computer, especially for patients we didn't want to come into the hospital if they were immunocompromised, or if they were really far and they could get on video, then that was more of an optimal scenario. As all of these things are happening, spending more time at home, what's happening for me, for the world, for patients, everyone? Our emotions are coming up during the lockdown, and a lot of thoughts, and we're noticing how mental health and emotional health is something that's really important but hasn't been talked about often, whether it's because of the stigma or because we don't know how to open up the conversation. And obviously it's changing now, clearly, and in the last decade, which is so beautiful, but it took this process to get here. when I started doing some of the deeper work, learning about myself, learning about how the soul and spirit play out in our evolution, I was able to see that these patients were also on their own journey, and that what they were experiencing was not necessarily any type of coincidence, meaning it wasn't actually unusual that a lot of these prostate cancer patients were experiencing so much anger, because the prostate has to do with the reproductive organs for the man. And as we know, for a lot of us, whether it's man or woman, male or female, our reproductive organs, also known to be in the area of the sacral chakra. In yogic philosophy, that's where we harbor our emotions, our creativity, our sensuality, our sexuality, our expression. And if we have gone through life suppressing that or feeling ashamed of it for any reason, whether it's our own shame or feeling generational shame, what society has placed on us, as in you're not supposed to do this, you can do this, what's allowed, what are we afraid of, judgments, all these things, then it's not unusual to see that if someone's emotions have been repressed, that they experience a lot of anger, especially when they have such a diagnosis. And now all of it's kind of coming to the surface. And so I'm not necessarily pushing it as in it's this one thing that caused everything else. I'm saying that there are these things that are happening in the spirit on an energetic level that could transpire and then create this ripple effect into the multidimensional existence of a person's holistic health and well-being. It's also not unusual that I saw some of these people going through divorces a week before they passed away, financial worries. One of the common things I was able to see is that many of these people struggled in their relationships. And we know that relationships are a huge part of our happiness. This is known scientifically. Those of us who are in more healthier relationships, not just romantic, it can include romantic, also platonic, friendship, our community, our families. It's this feeling of belonging, and also the sense of I'm seen for who I really am, not necessarily who someone else wants me to be. And that feeling of feeling safe and being accepted just as we are is something that we all need. It's a basic human need. So it's understandable that if someone has cancer and now all of a sudden they're questioning their lives and they have more time to spend in solitude in these hospital beds for longer periods of time, they're not just evaluating what's going on with them on a physical level. They're thinking about their relationships, their marriages, their children, who's their support system. All these things are coming up, and it's because there's this imbalance within the spirit somewhere where they may not have felt worthy or enough, and those core wounds transpire in different ways. Science often teaches things like genetics and how genetics play a role, mutations and things like that. And I don't want to discard that. Like, science is valid. Like, we can use that as a system to approach understanding the physical aspects of our health and well-being. We are biology. We do have this physical body, which is beautiful. It's our vessel that allows us to carry forth our wisdom, to share our wisdom, and to do our work on this planet. It's a beautiful thing. And we're also spirit. And so as I'm learning about all these different things and also working with different shamans, working with holistic wellness practitioners, understanding what's being unlocked, I could see that even for me, something that I'll share. For a long time, growing up in a Catholic school where there were so many strict rules, so much discipline, but not exactly the type of discipline that one needs to stay focused. It's more of, you need to do this. These are the rules, or you get detention. And so it wasn't uncommon for a teacher to throw chalk if you spoke something when you were not supposed to, or you were having fun with your friends, and throwing meter sticks and all these things, and saying things like, shut up. We've heard this from even our parents sometimes. And this isn't to blame anyone. It's just to understand how these different things have played out in our lives. Maybe even talking to a friend just tells you to shut up or stop or be quiet. All these things get lodged, and in a place that is as potent as our throat chakra, which is the chakra responsible for our expression, authentic expression, not just any expression, but speaking our truth, our inner truth, our communication. Also, what I learned, it's from Sanskrit, it comes from the root word vishuddhi, which means purification. And so it's the purification center of our thoughts, our self-talk, our judgments, both what we feel about ourselves as well as what we project to others, gossip, insulting, shaming others. The words that we speak, it carries so much energy and so much power. And so the more that we do this work to cleanse the throat chakra, we start to express ourselves more beautifully. And when we are quick to judge someone, obviously we're human, things can still happen. We're quicker to apologize. We're quicker to accept, okay, this has happened, and now I want to do my best to repent, to say sorry, to just admit that I judged in this case, and it was probably a self-judgment, which was then projected outward. And the more that we do this, it's not a one and done process, but the more that we do this, and coming from a place of, I want to do this to come back into my wholeness, not through seeing yourself as imperfect or necessarily wanting to go into perfectionism, because perfectionism or being perfect doesn't exist, but we are perfect in our divine self. And so when we approach it from this lens, then it's understandable that having grown up in the environment that I did, and noticing also that this was passed on from my lineage, where my paternal grandmother had throat cancer and didn't even tell people about it. The irony of that. It's like it makes sense. And then learning about her role as a wife, and how when she went from her father's house to her husband's house, she had to do whatever was expected of her. She had to wear some of her clothes in a different way, look down. She had to be more submissive, very subservient. She couldn't really speak up for herself. And I had this vulnerable conversation with my father to better understand her own upbringing. So when you put all those things together, you understand that our world has gone through a lot. It's not about saying, oh yeah, this is because of my religion, this is because of that. It's about understanding all the different pieces together, accepting that they happened, and then choosing to do our part in clearing those beliefs that we don't need to hold on to anymore, in letting those emotions go, processing them, feeling them, letting them go, and coming back to our inherent state, which is wholeness. This isn't something we're trying to be, it's something we already are. It's that we let go of all the other things that have kind of come in the way. So in my journey, for instance, as I started doing yoga, learning from different shamans about the energetics and how the soul was fragmented in some of these experiences, I was able to break through some really challenging cycles. One of them I'll share vulnerably was this whole huge cycle that I've noticed in my life with narcissism. Now, I'm learning that it's important not to just label things like empath, narcissist, and I'm creating this divide. If you know about soul contracts, we all call in certain people, teachers, into our lives to teach us different things at different points in our lives. And the whole purpose is for these situations to help us heal through old wounds. From a shamanic perspective, it's believed that when someone has called in some unhealthy relationships, or even what some people call toxic environments, toxic relationships, abusive dynamics, it's usually to heal wounds related to maladaptive patterns that they adopted in childhood. If you want to broaden it, sometimes it can be things due to past lives, trauma that we're still holding on to. However, I think there's a lot we can learn about our lives from our childhood. It's not the only important part, it's that it's a huge part of our well-being and also the way that we function, operate in the world. There was so much that was ingrained in us in our childhood. I do want to make a point to emphasize that. So when you learn about these things from a shamanic perspective, you learn that these people who may be triggering you, and they can only trigger you if there's something within you that unconsciously or consciously gives them permission. It's not something that someone can just overtake. It's something that's already unsettled inside. And what they're doing is they're helping bring that to the surface. Now, here's the thing, and this is one of the things that I learned in my own journey. There's a part of humanity that believes that in order to heal and transcend that, we have to suffer. This has been so much of our conditioning. It's actually why a lot of people turn to spirituality because they experience the suffering, and then it's like, now what? And something that I am opening my eyes to, my heart, my soul, my spirit to, is what if we can heal through joy? What if we can heal through love and acceptance and compassion? And it's a journey, because sometimes what you'll get is, oh, that's bypassing. It's not bypassing if you're feeling your emotions. Things still come up. This isn't a journey of perfection. Things still come up. But instead of looking at people as though something happened, they're fragmented, they're broken, instead of that, seeing people in their light, seeing them in their power, and then watching them rise to it. It's natural. It's a natural elevation. It's why prayers are so powerful. Prayers that are powerful declarations rather than being worried or anxious about something. So there's a lot of different elements that came to light. And as I noticed in my prayers, starting to pray for guidance on being able to speak my truth, praying for guidance on being able to speak what is authentic to me, rather than still playing into things that I learned from childhood, saying things that other people wanted to hear because there was things like punishment and discipline, punishment, detention. There was a part of me still holding on to that fear. And how that looked like was fear of people's projections, fear of their judgments. And the thing is, we're human. We're going to be doing these things. It's part of our humanity. It's part of our human experience. And this is why going back to some of the most basic principles, such as love, acceptance, asking for forgiveness, being quick to apologize, asking for mercy, asking for God's mercy, these things are timeless. And I feel that the more we let go of our own pride and just kind of open up to this, there will be less emotions that get trapped. Instead, we process them as they come in the right timing, whether it's in the present moment or when we feel safe to open it up, whether it's with a trusted friend, a counselor, a therapist, whoever that person is. And once we do that, we're letting things go, kind of like how children do so easily. They get mad, they throw a tantrum, and then they let it go, they move on. As adults, we hold on to things a lot more often. And when we hold on to things, it actually weighs us down, whether it's the form of emotional weight, a burden, feeling pressured, doubting ourselves. It's like these cycles just go on until we start to ask for help on our path, asking for God to give us guidance, asking for spiritual guidance, learning to be with our emotions, and also learning that as humans, we're doing the best that we can. When I share my story now, it's not coming from a place of, these are things I wish I did differently. I think my journey was perfect in the way that it unfolded. I think that the way things happened, in the timing that it happened, actually allowed me to gain the wisdom and extract the wisdom from each moment in the unraveling of this journey. And so as I'm talking about these things over a decade later, I can sense that by working with some of these shamans, by turning inwards toward my faith, feeling this calling to Jesus Christ. Again, I have a podcast episode on it. I recommend listening to it because it explains a lot about why I talk about Jesus Christ a lot now. And he's been such an instrumental teacher on my path. What I'm learning is through him, through the different holistic healers, is that a lot of times that disconnection in spirit comes when we are tapped out of our connection to God. It happens to all of us, so it's not something we need to be hard on ourselves. This isn't something that I'm sharing to say, okay, you need to go believe in something. That's not necessarily what I'm conveying. What I'm conveying is that we are all human and spirit. However, we focus too much on our human journey throughout our lives because we're seeking external validation. We're seeking society's approval. Go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is all about, look at what I did. Look at what I'm doing. Look at these amazing things. It's as though we constantly want people to acknowledge us and to approve of us and what we're doing. And this can be an endless cycle for some people. I've had patients that I have provided care for that they didn't stop working while they were in the hospital, even though they were getting their transplant that day. And it's a known side effect that you could feel fatigued the day of. So we actually recommend patients to relax. Some patients didn't. They felt like they had to work. And obviously it could be due to other reasons. Maybe they're scared that they might lose their job. There could be so many things. I could sense that so much of what we do on this planet, and we just keep going at it and going at it, is because we feel like we need to prove something, and we think that the power, the security comes from everything outside of us. And that's what's shaped a lot of our decisions for many centuries. And the power of tuning into our faith and our spirituality and really surrendering, not just, oh, I surrender, turning to God and saying, I really could use your assistance. What are you trying to teach me? Where are you leading me? Show me that I'm supported. When we do that and really let go and surrender and accept the moment, coming into the present moment, arriving in the present moment, what we feel is peace. We feel calm in our mind and our body. So things can still be happening, but it's as though there's an anchor inside of us that keeps us rooted no matter what is unfolding outside of us. And that's a part of us that's unshakable. That's our divinity. That's our connection to God. And I feel that this all ties into the idea of holistic health and well-being, the full spectrum of holistic health and well-being. Because if we are starting to understand that a lot of these things happen in the spirit, then we'd be quicker to go back to who knows us best in the spirit. And if our souls are here to be infinitely expanded into our infinite potential, the only one who can assist us with that really is God, because God is infinite. It's been something that I've gone through where a lot of times if I'm going through something, previously, not so much anymore, but I'm still human, is that instead of turning straight to God, I'll try to do all the things. Like, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to clear this, I need to heal that. And what I've noticed in recent years is when I shift to prayer, I can still be doing some of the other things. However, I feel that a large part of the burden has been given to God and it's taken care of. And things happen miraculously, whether I'm guided to the right mentor, whether I'm guided to the right community, things happen, and they happen really naturally. With integrative medicine also, I was able to see chaplains come into the room and say prayers with patients. Patients often asked for prayers. They would say, this is my faith. I really feel that I could use a talk right now. And they would ask for a prayer. They would ask for some words of guidance. And so it's interesting noticing these different things and how it significantly impacted my own journey and my transformation. It showed me that there's a world beyond the physical. So how this ties in to oncology, because that's been primarily my area of work, given what I went through. I noticed that, especially in recent roles, health coaching as well as providing supportive care to patients, it was interesting to note the different types of emotions or thought processes happening in different patients with different diagnoses. So one of them being, for instance, breast cancer patients. What I noticed, a general theme, and I'm not generalizing all patients, it's just a theme that I saw amongst women with breast cancer, is that many of them would tell me that they felt unsupported. I thought that was really interesting because the breast, if you look at it from a physical perspective, they need to feel supported. That's why we wear bras. And these women would talk about how they were the ones doing everything and that they were afraid to ask for help, to be seen in that vulnerable state, asking to be held. They were the ones doing everything, running these businesses, they're doing their jobs, and they're also the ones taking care of everything in the household for their husbands, their children, everything. And so to ask for support from someone else was huge for them. It was a place of vulnerability. It wasn't weakness, but it was a place of vulnerability to say, hey, I know I'm the one who's always taking care of people, and now I actually need your support in holding me. That takes courage. I noticed that many of them also experience things such as unprocessed grief from loss of loved ones, whether it was their parents, a divorce that had happened years prior. just little things. And so they were often expressive in their emotions. I found that they were quicker to cry on calls. And if they try to hold themselves back or resisted, then it just came out even more, which is all beautiful. Noticing these different patterns, even with thyroid health, I've noticed many patients who came to me in yoga, many students, whether it's Hashimoto's, nodules that are being monitored, or cancer that they had, they often say something similar, which is that they've had a hard time speaking their truth. So it's interesting noticing the different areas that these organs are located, that these parts of our bodies are located, and then understanding how they play out in terms of the emotions that patients are experiencing and processing, and what they're making it mean, and what their stories and their past experiences are. And prostate cancer, seeing 30 patients a day, almost 30 patients a day, for close to 5 days a week for a year, was enough for me to see that many men had anger and resentment that had gone unprocessed for a long time. It's like the first thing many of these patients wanted to discuss is their mental health, and that they were still holding on to some things from their past, even if it was years or decades prior, and it was impacting their current existence. So this is why I brought up everything about the dissociation piece and soul fragmentation, because it's not that any one thing is the key, it's that it's all interconnected. However, I feel that perhaps going into the spirit and the energy is a way that goes more closer to the source of why things happen, and then how it transpires out is that it doesn't just impact and potentially help with curing or helping to cure the disease, but also other areas of people's lives. Meaning, it wasn't uncommon for me to hear stories about some of these patients feeling unloved by their parents. I heard that quite a few times, and that really shifted something in me, because childhood trauma is something so many people can relate to. And again, it's not about blaming our parents. Our parents are children too in their own ways, and they've been children of their own parents. So it's about opening our perspectives, trying to understand their experiences, and then realizing, okay, now that we have all this awareness and understanding, now it's up to us to change the way going forward, because we can't do that by blaming and shaming. We can only do that by taking ownership and doing our part in transforming our lives. And part of that transformation, I believe, also involves the boldness and the humility and the courage to ask for spiritual guidance on our path, ask to be shown what is this moment teaching us, and ask for God's mercy to help us as we're evolving. So putting all these things together and then learning about the power of peace, I feel like this is what I'll wrap it up with. I think one of the biggest things that I've experienced in my heart with this calling back to Jesus Christ, I'm not pushing this on anyone, this is my personal, maybe testimony, if you want to call it that. I just feel such peace in my life. And while I noticed this year some of these relationships that weren't aligned still in my vicinity, I was still available for them at that time, one of the biggest intentions I had for this year was to come back to my peace. I believe that this whole world could be a different place if we strived for more peace. However, we can't change others. We can only focus on ourselves and the change that we are trying to be. And hopefully, as a byproduct, that helps to change the world for the better. So that was one of my biggest intentions for this year. Obviously, if you're still playing into lower dynamics and attracting in narcissists or these relationships where there are big imbalances, where you're giving and it's being taken, it's not giving and receiving, it's giving and someone's taking, and it doesn't feel aligned. Normally, what I used to do in the past, which can happen, and it's part of the healing journey, especially when we still have something within us that's still looking for our presence and our love, is I would fight back and retaliate. And for anyone who hasn't had experience with this, good for you. Stay blessed. what usually happens is that actually is fuel for that kind of relationship. You're being triggered and then activated and going at it is actually fuel for that kind of relationship. What actually helps to bring peace into that relationship so that there's this peaceful falling away is by being at peace in your own life. And so as I kept coming back to my peace, I learned that it was easier to walk away. And that when I walked away, it felt like a full walking away, as in walking away with peaceful resolution, not that previous walking away, but then questioning, should I go back? There was still this attachment before. And then this year I noticed, because of praying so much more often and really surrendering to the prayer and trusting that what was happening was actually the answered prayer. So letting go of an environment that wasn't fitting me anymore, that was part of the answered prayer. Letting go of relationships that were draining me, even though all I wanted to do was pour love. Well, that was a beautiful reminder to take all that love and refuel myself, and also be surrounded by a beautiful community that also is so soul nourishing for me. And likewise, where my love was received. So as all these things happened, I really became in tune with something. There's a saint in Italy, Giuseppe Moscati. I love learning about him. And I learned about him because 9 years ago, when I was going through a really big spiritual awakening, it's what all the fancy kids say, I went to Italy, and I remember writing this letter to God, and I read it in different churches that I went to. Some of them were big cathedrals, some of them were small local chapels and churches. And when I look at the way my life unfolded the next few years, there were still some trials and tribulations, and I felt that my inner core was being strengthened. And technically that was part of an answered prayer, because at that time I did pray to be stronger in myself and who I am. And so last year, my brother and my sister-in-law, I call her my sister, they got married and they went to Italy for their honeymoon. And because all these beautiful things had transpired in my life, I wrote another letter, and this time it was a letter of gratitude. And I told my sister-in-law, place it in a church that you think is aligned for this, like the perfect church to receive this gratitude. And obviously no church is better than another church. It's just, I just wanted to go where the energy and intention would flow the best. And she said she didn't know why, but she felt drawn to this one church in giving this letter of gratitude. And when I looked up the church, I noticed that that church was really devoted to the saint, Giuseppe Moscati. And I read about him. And his story is very interesting because he was a doctor who then became patronized as a saint. I think that's the word, patronized. And when I read about his story, I sensed something that felt like truth in the character that he encompassed, which is he knew the power of praying for someone's spirit when they were going through a moment of sickness. He said in those moments, those patients' spirits, their souls, were actually yearning for God, to be closer to God. And so he would sometimes care for the poor or the sick without charging them money. He would teach other residents about how he would pray for his patients. A lot of residents were curious as to how some of his patients were experiencing miracles from some incurable diseases, and yet he was able to perform those miracles. And it's because he knew he was being used as an instrument of God. His work was really powerful. He was really dedicated to spreading his work, and perhaps from what I read, he could have been someone who looked at his work as a form of ministry, because what he was doing was praying for his patients' lives, praying for their radiant and amazing health. And there's a quote, I don't remember the exact quote, but there was a letter that they found that he wrote to a former student, and he said something along the lines of, the only unshakable science is that of God, something to that extent, meaning we're so adamant about, oh, these are the facts, this is what it's teaching, it's science. I'm not against science. I have a master's in science. I also have my bachelor's in biology. I love science. I think it's an interesting and amazing field. I think what's being conveyed here is science and spirituality are very interconnected. And the real anchor is not necessarily in seeing the tangible, the logical. It's in the intangible. It's in the spirit. It's in the things that don't necessarily make logical sense, but we know we are being called forth and called towards because we are all here for a greater purpose. And if we're truly extensions of God, yes, as our own individual body and also part of the collective whole, then it makes sense why we would turn inwards and ask some of these deeper questions, asking for God's guidance, understand the significance of what he's trying to convey through that. And I think it's also a very beautiful way to express that and the work that he did. How this all transpired in my life is that when I was able to break through that wound, that cycle of narcissism, there were a lot of emotions that got released for sure. There was grief, there was anger, there was resentment, and then on the other side of that, there was a lot more peace. There was peace, serenity, love, and acceptance. Acceptance that many of these people who I felt triggered by were also my teachers. Challenging teachers, and perhaps the teachers that I needed in order to step into more of my purpose. And I've also been praying to God, and I'll share this for anyone who could also use this prayer, is to help me accept that healing and transformation can also happen and can now happen from a place of joy, love, peace, and acceptance. My prayer for anyone who's watching this is that whatever phase, whatever part of your growth journey, whatever part of your journey you're in right now, I pray for so much peace over your life. And I pray that wherever you are, you turn inwards to God, especially in asking some of these bigger questions, not seeking on anything outside of you, but turning inwards. And remembering that it is your divine blueprint, your original divine blueprint. God created each of us to be in perfect radiant health. It's for every single person on this planet. So I pray that you know that radiant health is yours to receive and be and embody. And wherever you may need it in your life today, I pray that we all receive infinite miracles and are open enough, receptive enough to receive them. Thank you so much for being a part of my journey, and I wish you the most beautiful day.